February 24, 1986, a fateful and distressing day unfolded for John Rutten, who devoted every moment to trying to reach his 29-year-old wife, Sherri Rasmussen. Despite his persistent efforts to contact her by phone, Sherri remained completely unresponsive. As he pulled his car into the garage of their Los Angeles home, John's anxiety deepened when he noticed shards of broken glass scattered on the ground. What compounded his growing concern was the conspicuous absence of the BMW he had given Sherri just a few months earlier. As he approached their apartment, a bone-chilling discovery awaited John. The front door was slightly ajar. A foreboding sense of dread gripped him, and within moments, his worst nightmares turned into a grim reality. His beloved wife, Sherri, lay lifeless on the floor, her pulse non-existent. The detective assigned to investigate this case was none other than Lyle Meyer. As he embarked on his inquiry, an unusual scene awaited him. An assortment of electronic equipment neatly arranged in the living room, next to Sherri Rasmussen's lifeless body. It was clear that the perpetrator had intended to steal these valuable items, yet for reasons unknown, had left them behind. John Rutten, Sherri's husband, was subjected to questioning as part of the investigative process. In a surprising twist, only days into the investigation, the official conclusion was that Sherri Rasmussen's tragic death had resulted from a failed burglary attempt carried out by an unknown individual with no prior connection to the victim. However, more than 2 decades later, this seemingly straightforward case took a new and perplexing turn, revealing that the assailant had a deeply personal grudge against Sherri Rasmussen. Their paths had crossed during their time as students at the University of California, Los Angeles. John Rutten was immersed in his mechanical engineering studies, while Stephanie Lazarus pursued a degree in political science. Both were vibrant and popular individuals with promising futures ahead of them. During their university years, Rutten and Lazarus embarked on a romantic relationship. After graduating, John pursued a career as a computer programmer, while Lazarus joined the LAPD as an officer. It was during this phase that Rutten's path crossed with Sherri Rasmussen, who held the position of recruiting director at Glendale Medical Center. At a 25th birthday celebration organized by Lazarus for Rutten, he confided in her about his growing relationship with Rasmussen, acknowledging the depth of their commitment. Overwhelmed with desperation, Lazarus composed a heartfelt letter to John's mother, expressing her profound affection for him and the emotional turmoil his confession had stirred. "I am truly in love with John, and his confession has deeply affected me. I would hate for our connection to end this way. I don't think I will ever understand his choice." Rasmussen and Rutten's love story flourished, leading them to move into a rented apartment together. After the events involving Rasmussen, Rutten admitted that he and Lazarus had met several times before he married Sherri, with the intention of ending their relationship amicably. However, Lazarus became increasingly attached to John and persistently extended invitations to him. Her persistent contact with John raised concerns for Sherri, but Rutten assured her that his connection with Lazarus was purely platonic. On one occasion, Stephanie confronted Rasmussen at her workplace, stating, "If I can't have John, no one else will." Only 3 months after their wedding, tragedy struck when Sherri met a grim fate. During the subsequent forensic examination conducted by the LAPD, a disturbing discovery came to light. A bite mark was found on the young woman's arm. The unfolding investigation took an unexpected twist when a janitor at the couple's apartment complex came forward, disclosing that he had stumbled upon a woman's purse, later confirmed to belong to Sherri Rasmussen. Adding to the complexity of the case, a diligent maid working on the floor above reported hearing what sounded like a heated altercation around 12:30 p.m., followed by the sound of something crashing. Astonishingly, despite hearing screams, neighbors chose not to contact the police. The prevailing theory pointed to a burglar in the process of stealing electronic equipment, encountering Rasmussen, leading to a violent confrontation. The firearm used was concealed beneath a quilted blanket, seemingly to muffle the noise of gunshots. In a troubling twist, another apartment in the same vicinity fell victim to a break-in, with electronic gear disappearing. The unsettling detail that struck Detective Meyer's partner, Steve Hooks, was the unusual nature of the bite mark on Sherri's arm. Typically, such bites during altercations were more commonly associated with female perpetrators, while burglars were predominantly male. This incongruity added an eerie layer to the mystery at hand. The investigation into Sherri Rasmussen's murder took a baffling twist when her missing car was discovered abandoned approximately 20 kilometers from her home. Oddly, the only item missing from the vehicle was the couple's marriage certificate. Initially considered a suspect, John Rutten was eventually cleared of suspicion and relocated away from Los Angeles following the tragic incident, eventually remarrying 5 years later. Rasmussen's father raised concerns with the police, citing threats his daughter had received from none other than police officer Stephanie Lazarus. However, due to apparent conflicts of interest, Lazarus was questioned and subsequently released, causing the case to hit a standstill with no definitive suspects identified. Sherri Rasmussen's father tirelessly worked to reopen the case for several years. In 2004, a breakthrough occurred when forensic scientist Jennifer Francis uncovered a critical piece of evidence: a cotton swab containing DNA from a bite mark. This revelation led to a startling discovery. The saliva and bite mark were unmistakably linked to a woman, contradicting the initial theory of a male burglar. In 2009, the LAPD rekindled its interest in the case, classifying the robbery and Sherri Rasmussen's murder as a staged event meant to mislead authorities. Detectives began to zero in on Stephanie Lazarus as a prime suspect, intensifying their investigation. Disturbingly, it was determined that the shattered glass found by Rutten resulted from a bullet fired from inside the house, contradicting the expected scenario of an external burglary. With the spotlight now firmly on Stephanie Lazarus, a fellow LAPD detective, a series of suspicious details emerged. She had visited John's house multiple times the night before the murder. Furthermore, Lazarus had reported her guns stolen within days of the crime, leading investigators to suspect she had disposed of the murder weapon herself. DNA analysis from a disposable coffee cup eventually matched the sample extracted from the bite mark on Rasmussen's arm. Upon Lazarus's arrest, a search of her home yielded a diary from the mid-1980s filled with references to her unrequited love for Rutten and her despair over his engagement to Rasmussen, conspicuously lacking any mention of her missing firearm. Computer records revealed numerous late 1990s internet searches of John Rutten's name. Following her arrest, Lazarus retired early from the LAPD. Her bail hearing was significantly delayed, and when it finally occurred, the judge set bail at an astounding $10 million in cash, citing concerns that she might flee the country using firearms obtained through her husband. The trial began in early 2012 in the Los Angeles County Superior Court, with prosecutors arguing that Stephanie Lazarus' motive was rooted in jealousy over Sherri Rasmussen's relationship with John Rutten. Lazarus was ultimately found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 27 years in prison. She is currently serving her sentence at the California Institution for Women, with parole eligibility scheduled for December 2034. Despite multiple attempts to appeal her case, appellate courts have upheld her sentence.